Welcome back. In this recording, we're going to start off with looking at sorting or reordering a data frame. So if we go back to the RStudio script that we have, so point 3 will be to, what we call it? We'll call it sorting or ranking. Okay, so what I would feel is very important before you entertain reordering your data is that you definitely have a measurement that you can, a reference measurement that you can bring your data back into its original form. So where you basically have this kind of participant ID or subject ID. That's obviously what we address in the second point. Again, just highlighting that that's an important part that you have, okay, that if you're going to reorder your data, you always want to have some measurement that you can bring it back into its original form. Now, the function we're going to use to reorder our data here, and what I'm just going to look at in 3 different scenarios. We're going to look at putting the data in ascending order, then descending order, and then looking at maybe ascending by 2 variables. And from that, then you'll know where to go afterwards. Okay, so when you kind of reorder, or when you're looking at ordering your data, you're essentially looking at your original data frame. Now, you can overwrite the order in your original data frame, or you can reorder your data and give the result and create a new data frame. Now, that's the way I'm just going to do it here, only because I just don't want to be messing around with the original data frame that we have, which is diet. Now, we can do that if we wanted to, but I just think it's nearly easier for the purposes of the recording that if we create 3 separate kind of data frames for each kind of scenario that we're looking at, so that you can kind of look at it then at a later stage yourself. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is I'm going to call it an ascending one. So I'm going to create a new data frame which will be ascending or ascend. So I'm looking at my original data frame, which is diet, and when you're ordering it or sorting it in this case, so what we're going to do is we're going to sort it based on the triglyceride levels at baseline, which is our 3rd column, or which is TG0. Okay, so we're going to sort it by that. So when we're sorting it, so you have to kind of reference what row or column you want to use for the sorting. Okay, so when we're looking at our diet data frame, we're just going to do square brackets. So that means now we're referencing a certain part of it, which is ultimately your idea of indexing, and that's why that I first started off the recording, or the previous recording, with the idea of indexing. So we put in a comma here just to highlight, look, we're dealing with rows by columns. So what we're looking at doing here is we want to sort it based on the triglyceride levels at TG0. Okay, so the baseline triglyceride levels. So we're going to do order. You're going to use the order function. So we're opening up the brackets. Now, you could say, oh, I want to do it based on the triglyceride levels at the start, so TG0 is what it's called, okay? Now, if we run this, this is going to give us back an error, because what we need to do is we need to specify where does TG0 comes from, because we could have multiple data frames opened up here, and TG0 might be mentioned across multiple ones, okay? So when we're ordering it, we must reference where the measurement comes from. So for us, our measurement is coming from the diet data frame. And I know you'd maybe say, oh, look, is that not obvious here? Because we have a diet here, and now we're stating it here. But you could have multiple data frames opened up, and so this is where you have to be very particular by which one you're using as your reference, okay? So if we do something like this, and what I'll do here is I'll just put brackets around, actually, no, I'll leave it like this at the moment. I'm going to run it. Everything seems to be fine. We don't really see it. So what I'm going to just do here, I'm going to just view it, okay? So view, ASCEND, like that. I'm going to press Control Enter, and here's our new one now. And you can see here it's basically put in an order based on the lowest triglyceride levels at baseline up to the highest. Okay, and that's basically what we've done. Everything else kind of stayed the same. Obviously, not everything is the same. Everything's kind of sorted based on what that first measurement was. Okay. The other one would be, if we were interested in, would be descending. So just to kind of show you how do we actually do a descending one. So it's a similar idea. Okay, except this time if you're descending, you'd use a minus sign instead. Okay, so we do square brackets. I'll throw in the comma in between again to distinguish between rows and columns. I'll use the order function. I state the data frame that I'm using. Okay, and what we'll do in this case is we'll stick with the triglyceride levels at the start. Okay, so I'm going to say $sign. You can see TG0 pops up there. So that's, at the moment, that's the same as the first line. We have my line 44 as you're looking at the recording. But if I stick a minus sign in front of it, now it's actually going to do it as a descending. Okay. And again, I'm not putting in any comments to this, but at the end, I'll save all this script. And when I upload it up onto YouTube, I'll upload it with comments. Okay. So if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get all the additional comments. And if it might make things, I suppose, to explain all the steps. Press Control Enter. You can see it runs off fine. Again, I'll just do the view here, CEND, run like that. So what we've asked it to do is sort our data based on the triglyceride levels at baseline, largest first, and there it has done it. Okay, job done. So it can be useful. It can be useful. And I'm just going to show one more, and this is where we're going to look at, maybe we'll say ascending it by 2 measurements. So we're going to ascend it based on, just as an example, we're going to ascend it based on gender, and then follow on from the gender is based on triglyceride levels. Okay, so and it's not that I often find maybe just when you're doing examples like this, it's just useful to use the same measurement a few times just so you kind of become very familiar with that measurement and you understand what little tweaks and the impact the little tweaks have. So we're going to look at the diet data frame again, square brackets. In the square brackets, we can do the comma again, the comma to distinguish between rows and columns. And here what we're going to do is we're going to order again, open up the brackets like we've done a few times. Now here we state the data frame, $sign. We're going to use the gender of participants. I'm going to use rank it by gender, and then do comma inside the round bracket, staying inside the round bracket. So I'm going to say first rank it by gender, and then rank it by triglyceride levels at baseline. Okay, so if we run that, so Control R, sorry, not Control R, Control Enter. Control R is the syntax in SPSS, so I sometimes mix them up when I'm saying it. Ascend 2 is what ASCEND2. Do it up here. So what we're asking to do is to rank the data first by gender. So you can see it's first put the females because it's put in alphabetical order. I'll just extend this a small bit so we can see it. Then it has that aim, so that guy, this person, that's something that we have to fix up yet. And then we have the males. Okay, so that was the first thing. And then we asked that within the females, then rank all the measurements that you have now within the females based on the triglyceride measurements at the start, lowest to the highest, and that's what it's done. Okay, so it's quite handy, and obviously after that now you can keep going. You could say, oh, rank it now by TG0 and then rank it by TG1, whatever way you want to do it then after that. So this is where you can just add on multiple top parts to it. Okay, so it can be useful. Okay, so people have different uses to these parts. Okay, the other thing that I suppose I'd like to do is, and just I suppose why we kind of look at what we're doing here is we're kind of looking at sorting or ranking our data. The other thing that can be useful at times is reordering our data. Now, what I would have said in the part 1 recording here. Now I'm just going to close down these additional ones. So I don't really want to. We're not going to be using those anymore. So I'll come back to the diet one at the start. What I just find is useful is to have the participant ID, to have it at the start. I just think that's a nice thing, just formatting, nothing else to it, just formatting, okay? So I just want to just show you how we might reorder our data frame, swap around the measurements if it's something of interest, okay? Now, basically, we know that we've 12 measurements, but then we appended on this ID using the mutate function, so that gave us 13 measurements. So we know that we've 13, but again, I suppose I try to create a script to kind of make it more general if possible. Okay, so I'll just put in a comment here that we're looking at reordering variables. Okay, so I'm basically looking at putting the ID measurement first. So I know the ID is at the very end, but what number is it at the very end? Now we obviously know it's 13, but what if we didn't know it's 13? So I'm going to create a number column, is going to call it, and it's called it dimension. And we've done this we did this in the first recording. So we're looking at the dimension of the diet data frame, and we want it to tell us how many columns it has. So instead, the last time in the part 1 recording we did it, and you can see it up here in line 37, we looked at the square bracket 1, which is telling us how many rows. Now we're looking at number of columns. I'm going to just do round brackets around that so it outputs the answer, and obviously the answer that we should be getting back is 13. Very good. So now we know how many columns we will have. So this column, this number 13, we've assigned it to the column. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to reorder the data based on this. Okay, so a few ways we could do this. So what I'm going to just look at is I'm going to keep the same name. So I'm going to overwrite the original data frame that I have. I'm going to give based on what we had before. So I'm referencing again here. So this again is where the indexing comes into play. So I do the square brackets. I'm not reordering anything based on the rows, so I'm leaving the rows blank. But I am reordering the columns. So I'm saying columns. So I want my column 13 to become my column 1, and basically everything else to be pushed up. Okay, so I'm going to have to state all the columns. So I'm stating multiple columns this time. So I have to state it using the C. And then I'm going to say column, so COL, because that's the number 13 that we have. So I want to put that guy first, and then I'm going to say 1 up to col minus 1. Okay, now that's actually, before I run that, I'm just going to write it out another way, just so we can see the numbers part. It might make it just a bit easier. So what I'm looking at doing here is I want my 13 column to go first, and then after that I want it to be 1 to 12. Like that's basically what I want. Okay, so I want the 13 column to go in the front, and then my 12th original, I want them pushed up. all I'm just trying to do here is just write in a slightly more general script. So I'm, instead of 13, I'm using col for column, and then 1 up to col minus 1. So it doesn't look as clear cut. Press Control Enter. Press Control Enter. Everything seems to be fine. Let's come up to my data frame up here, and now you can see the IDs at the very start. Okay. Again, when I started off doing things with R, like this kind of whole generalization of the script, I would have found challenging. Okay, but it's just practice with doing it. Okay, I would often find that I try not to specify particular numbers if I can avoid it. Okay, if I can create variables or create parameters for things to make it more general and more usable going forward, it can be quite good. Okay. Right. So one more part to this part, and then we'll move. We'll end this bit of a recording. So the next part we're going to look at is just renaming a variable. Okay. So in the data frame that we had when we imported it, before we import it, if I just go back to the Excel file, I would have said, look, there's 2 variables here that we wanted to rename. Okay. I would just think I want to call this gender. And here, instead of calling it final TG4, I just wanted to be consistent with the other ones. I'm going to just call it TG4. Again, this is just an illustration. It's more just to show you how to use the particular script. Okay, so let's look at where's RStudio. So we come here to the 4th point. So the 4th point here we're looking at doing here is renaming variables. Now you might not need this. Okay, renaming variables if desired, but I would more often not when I get a data set from somebody, they usually have the variable names very long-winded, and I want to just condense it, because if I condense it, it just makes my script just that bit neater. So I want to make the variable name a small bit more concise, and I want a track record of doing that. So that's where I use this setnames function. Now, if I want to use the setnames function, this is actually using the data.table package. Okay, so we've obviously already installed it, but just to kind of reference it here, so I'm looking at the data.table package, so that's it there, it's already done, and I'm looking at the set names. Now I'm just going to comment this line out here, just because I'm just going to show you the script for looking at one of them first. Okay, so if I wanted to change one of them, so set names, that's fine. So I'm specifying the data frame, which is called diet. Then you could say, look, what was the old name? Well, the old name was gender of participants. Now I don't necessarily want to write out all that again, so I'm just going to cheat a small bit here. I'm going to get this guy to tell me, so this gives me all the text. It's just basically avoiding doing all the text, that's all. Here under inverted commas, I'm going to do gender of participants, closed inverted comma there. I thought I actually opened and closed it, and then I can give it the new name being whatever I want to call it, which I'd say here is gender. Okay, so that's one way. If I run this set names off as you see it here at the moment, it will actually just change the gender of participants variable name to gender. Okay, and that will work fine. Nothing wrong with it. Okay, I just want to look at changing 2 names. Okay, in one go, just because then if you know how to change 2, you know how to change 3, and it just shows a bit, I suppose, a small bit more efficient script if you wanted it. Okay, so we're going to look at set names again. We're going to use the diet data frame. Then, so the next part, so the second entry into this will be your old. You can see it here, it's prompting you, so what are your old? So here we have 2 old measurements that we're looking at doing. We're looking at the gender of participants measurement, and then we're going to be looking at the final TG4 measurement. So again, just to maybe highlight, I'm basically looking to change these 2 measurement names. I want to change 2 of them in one line of code. Okay, so the fact that I'm focusing on 2, I need to kind of highlight both of them. So I'm going to do the first one here, which is gender of participants under inverted commas. And what was the second one? The second one was final TG4. And I just want to make sure everything has to be case sensitive. You can see it's this lowercase f. That's fine. Final TG4. Okay, so that's the original. And so then I'm going to look at the new one. So C, open the brackets, comma. The first one will be gender. And then the second one will be, I'm just going to call it TG4. And again, it's just an illustration. And let's run this off. When we run, brackets are okay there, I think. Yeah, when we run it off, everything seems to be fine. Let's go back to the original data frame. And it actually didn't update it. I forgot that actually. I have to actually refresh the data frame here. So I'm going to look at viewing it. And if we view it, it will update it there. Now you can see gender is updated, and here TG4 is updated. Now, you can see up here that when we mutated on the ID, it automatically updated the diet. It doesn't automatically update your variable changes. You actually have to kind of refresh your data frame a small bit. So using the view is quite useful then for that. Okay. So by us using the view, we can now see back up here it has updated it. Okay. Now you can often find that sometimes when you're running off script, that you might maybe change the wrong data value or something like that, and you can upset your data frame, and you might want to rerun everything again. So often if I end up using view in my script, I usually just comment it out, because if I end up rerunning the script, I don't necessarily want all the new data frames to be popping open. Like you can see up here, like we did view ascend to, view descend, and so on like that. I would find if I just comment them out, then if I'm rerunning all the script, all those windows or all those data frames don't just open up. Okay. I definitely find I'd use this guy a lot, okay, using the set names. I use that a lot, and I find that's a nice function to using it. The next thing we want to look at will be defining the data types. Now, what we're relating to there is like this age measurement. You can see that 60 was going to be a problem here. And then for the gender, we have M is going to be a problem. So this is where we should have numeric data. It's not going to come up as numeric. This is causing us a problem. This here is where we should have binary data. It's not going to come up as binary data. And then how do we address that? So that's what we're going to look at in this third part to this set of recordings. Okay, so hopefully you're finding these of use, and come back to me and we'll look at we'll be progressing on with the next few points. Okay, talk to you soon.